Hi, it's Dougie Wood, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about some great top tips for when you're designing your new SharePoint Online intranet. So the first thing that I want to talk about is designing your SharePoint intranet homepage with vertical sections. So let's take a quick look at this. Now what we mean by a vertical section is this bar that we see on the right hand side. Now this is something which you can only get with this modern SharePoint user interface. And it's really useful because it breaks out the content, the main body of the content, which is almost like the 2/3 of the width of the page on the left-hand side, from a sort of secondary content area. Now, I like to use this with an intranet in conjunction with having a slider or something like that that's visual, and it's providing that kind of need for news or information with a more functional web part, like a quick links, for example. We've got links on here. Because a true SharePoint intranet needs to have the right balance between two things: communication and navigation. So providing people the latest information, news articles, documents and policies and procedures and all that good stuff, but also the functional element of actually helping people navigate to things as well, and using different navigational elements throughout the intranet. Now, to add a vertical section is really easy. When you edit a page and you go into edit mode, you'll notice that you can add sections to the page using this plus button on the left hand side. One of the options is a vertical section. Now, because I've already got this added, it's obviously grayed out. But if I was just to remove that section, you'll then see I can now add the vertical section back onto the page, and it gives me that bar on the right-hand side. I can then add web parts to it, like I can do with anywhere else on SharePoint, just by clicking on the little plus button. I can type in a web part, and that will then add that to that particular vertical section on the page. However, I'm just going to discard the changes because I don't want to get rid of, I don't want to save the changes there. But you can see it's a really good way of actually putting in information onto a page, and it means that you can put two different types of information on a page, and it visually breaks it up. So as you're kind of scrolling through the page, you've got a secondary area on the right hand side which could have totally different type of content. So subliminally people are actually realizing that that's a different type of content to the kind of content on the left hand side. So it might be that you break out to say more kind of visual things will be on the left hand side, and more the functional navigational items might be on the right hand side. But this is a great way of breaking out and getting more on the page as well. So if you're not really a fan of the designs which have a lot of scrolling in SharePoint, then having these vertical sections on the right hand side is a great way of getting that content on a page without having to have too much scroll. The next thing to be thinking about is the use of videos inside of your intranet. Now, video content is getting a lot more popular, and actually Microsoft are already ahead of the game with this because they have a product inside of Microsoft 365 which is called Stream, which is basically a little bit like YouTube in the sense that you can build out playlists of videos, and then you can embed either the whole playlist or an individual video directly into your SharePoint intranet. Now, these could be all sorts of different types of videos. These could be videos which are like onboarding videos, so new starters which are joining and you want them to sort of watch a handful of kind of videos. They could be like health and safety videos. They could be a whole host of different things, but you can have them sort of then put into a playlist inside of Stream and then embedded into SharePoint. So this video, I'm not going to go really in depth about Stream because it is a different product, but essentially you can get to Stream just by going to office.com, searching for Stream, and that'll then take you to the Stream interface. And as I say, you can build out channels of videos, almost like playlists, and upload different kind of videos in there. At the moment, it's worth noting that at the time of recording, that SharePoint will only allow you to embed videos from classic Stream. Stream is actually currently in the process of being upgraded. So the videos have to sit in the classic kind of interface rather than the modern interface if you want to embed them into SharePoint. But it's really easy to embed them into SharePoint. All you need to do is click on Edit, and then we add a web part to a page. And let's say, for example, we might want to add some videos here. We just look for the Stream web part, click on Stream, and you'll see then it'll automatically pull through all the videos which are currently inside of Stream, which actually I don't have any videos in here at the moment. And we can go into editing this web part, and we can choose whether we have a all of stream, as in everything inside of stream, a single video, so just one video. Now this could be really useful if you wanted to have like a CEO update or something like that, or messages from the management team. So rather than having like a newsletter or a bulletin or something like that, just a short video which maybe a senior member of the management team is recording, even from their phone. They can upload it then into Stream and embed it directly into the intranet homepage. Or you can have a channel, so it might just be like some latest kind of videos, as I say, some onboarding videos, training videos, that sort of thing. We can embed directly into here. Now, before I move on to the next kind of top tip, I'll also mention as well, you can embed YouTube videos. So if you don't want to use Stream, you can use a YouTube web part to do exactly the same thing. The only thing is you do need to paste in either the URL or an embed code that's generated from YouTube, but it can basically do exactly the same thing. So on to number 3, top tip, call to actions. Now, like with anything, if you're from a kind of web development background, you'll know the phrase call to actions as something that you want the user of the web page to do. So it might be, for example, in a traditional website, it would be, say, contact us or call now or submit a question or something like that. Whereas in an intranet, it might be, for example, you want a button which is going to take them directly to policies. It might be a button which is going to open up some marketing materials, for example. So let's take a little look again at that intranet homepage. Now, I've actually got some call to actions on here already, like policies, marketing materials, forms for people to jump directly into, and they can click on the open button, and that will then launch them directly to those particular things. But this could be all sorts of different things, right? It could be used for feedback. On the intranet homepage. It could be a link to a whistleblowing form or something like that. Now, we can use this to either link to a hyperlink, so maybe it's linking to a SharePoint site or a page, a file or a folder, or even an external web page. As long as it's got a hyperlink, a URL, you can put it into these buttons. The other cool thing as well is you can also automatically get it to open up an email for you as well. So if I just click on this edit button here, let's say, for example, we want to add another call to action, but I'm going to add it underneath here. I'm going to click on add web part, find the call to action web part, and you'll notice it's responsive, right? So it'll fit the space that you give it. So it's really wide because it's in this full width section, whereas if I add it on the right hand side, it's going to be much smaller. Now, I can add in some text. So this might be, do you have a question? For example, so just type into that black box. Now, if we want to update the button link or where it's going to, the hyperlink, we can click on this edit web part, and then you've got this button label. So this might be, say, contact us, and we could provide a link to Google, for example. And you can now see it's now a clickable button. So now if I republish, and I click on that button, it's then going to open up in a browser Google as my hyperlink. I can also get this to open up an email. So if I wanted to email this to a certain mailbox, I can just type in mail to, like this, and then I type in an email address. So I'll just put Dougie at example.com, and then when I click on republish, what will then happen is when I click on contact us, it will then automatically launch an email in my the desktop computer. It's opened up Outlook, and it's going to send an email directly to that mailbox. So this is a great idea if you're wanting to submit a sort of almost like a feedback type of form, or if it's like a general kind of question or something like that. We can also change the background image. So by selecting on the web part, we can change the background image of this by clicking on the change button across the top. We can either upload our own images, or we can choose the stock image library, which is really good actually. And we can, let's say, for example, I actually noticed the other day there's some nice cool background pictures of just concrete, which actually work really well as a kind of textured image in the background of these call to actions. So when you click on republish, there we go. We now got our call to action. Do you have a question? You click on contact us, and it'll automatically open up an email to the designated mailbox. So The next top tip is to use SharePoint News Rollups. Now, if you're not already doing this or you're considering building out a new SharePoint intranet, it's worth thinking about news rollups. So what we mean by this is having a news web part on your intranet homepage, which is then pulling up content from other areas of the intranet. So let's take a look. So back on our intranet homepage, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit, and you can see here we've got this news web part. Now, this news web part isn't just pulling out news articles from this particular SharePoint site. Typically, when I design an intranet homepage like this, the top sort of scrolling news banner, so these are links to news articles. If I click on one, it will open up the full news article. Now, the slider across the top is typically for like everybody in the organization, right? So it's content which everybody's going to be interested in and want to see. Whereas further down, this news web part is usually more of a roll-up from news articles which are created in other areas of the intranet. Because your SharePoint intranet isn't just one site, it's usually an intranet homepage, and then you'd have department sites or business unit sites or sites for projects or initiatives or whatever it is, but they're usually sites around other topics, and then you can create news articles on those sites and then roll them up. So you can see here this new starter news article is actually being created on the operations site. We've got news articles pulling from the finance site as well, or the marketing site, or the human resources site. These are all the different SharePoint sites that I have inside of my intranet, and I'm rolling up those news articles. Now, it's really easy to configure this. We just need to edit the web part by editing the page, then selecting the web part, and then you can see the news source across the top. Now, we can either say this site, which will only show me news articles created from this particular site, or I can say all sites in the hub, which will include the current site, so the intranet homepage, as well as all the other sites which are linked to this or basically associated to this via the hub site settings. And if you're not too sure what I mean by hub sites, I have a couple of different videos which explain what a SharePoint hub site is, as well as how to create a hub site. So go and check those out, and that'll explain a bit more about what hub sites are. But essentially, the hub site is your intranet homepage, and then you have sites which associate to that. Or we can specify selected sites. If I only wanted news to come from finance and operations, I can select those two sites, and then you can see here it's only pulling through content or rolling up those news content from those particular areas. I can also specify different layouts. So at the moment I've got Hub News, but say if I wasn't having as many news articles, I might want to have the top story, or again, you could have a carousel, a side-by-side, tiles, which look a bit like the hero web part. There's a couple of different options that we've got here that we can display. I'm just going to go back and actually just say this is all sites in the hub. But when you're thinking about this news roll-up, you want to be thinking about how much content is actually going to be created, because I've seen a lot of people go a bit nuts with this, and they think, oh yeah, well, there's going to be loads of news articles that are going to be created. And sometimes there is for the first few weeks that people love using SharePoint straight away and they want to use it, but eventually they get drawn back into their day-to-day job and they don't have as much time to be creating news articles. So the worst case scenario is that you get an intranet where, say for example, it's mid-August and you've still got news articles on here which is talking about Christmas parties from 8 months before. So you don't want to have stagnant news on your intranet homepage. So when you're thinking about roll-up, think about how much content is likely going to be created. Because let's say, for example, if you're going to create a news article every day, then you're going to get 5 news articles that appear on here fresh every single week. Whereas if you're going to be creating one a month, then it's going to take, for example, well, we can count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and actually there's a 12th slot here. So it's going to take a full year if you're only going to create a news article once a month. For that news article to drop off, because as you add new news articles, they will slide along. So as a news one, it will push this one to the right and then all the way, and then this one will then join here and go down, and eventually it'll drop off the side. So if you're only going to create one once a month, you're probably better having something which has got something like this top news story. So then that actually we're only showing 4 news articles, so a news article would only stay here for 4 months before it dropped off the page. Or we could say we have a list view and we sort of draw this down, so we're going to have 2 news articles, so it's say 2 months in that example. So the point of my waffling anyway is to try and get the point across that think about how much news content you're actually going to create, and then let that be what makes the decision about what the roll-up is going to look like based on the amount of number of news articles you're going to have on your homepage. And whilst we're on the topic of SharePoint News, I want to talk a little bit about SharePoint newsletters, because again, although this is not necessarily a feature of a SharePoint Intranet homepage, it's a great way when you're first designing your SharePoint Intranet to be transitioning people from using things like emails and things like that for getting newsletters and information to using SharePoint. So you've got to transition them from using emails into SharePoint. So a great way to do this is actually if you go to your news web part, you'll see here a see all button. Now, you'll only see that see all button if the amount of news articles exceeds what you can display on this page. So I can only display 4 news articles on here, but I've got, say, 11 news articles potentially that could be pulled through. So now it's saying see all. So when I click on that see all button, that's going to take me to a page where I can see all the news articles that could potentially be displayed on that homepage. Now you'll see across the top we've got this email and news digest button. Now this is a great way of actually creating a newsletter from content you've already got and then emailing it to people. So people who are already used to receiving emails as their way of receiving newsletters will get that and get a short summary of text that they can then click through, and it will open up the intranet from this. So all I need to do is choose a couple of news articles that I want to put into my newsletter. Then I'm going to click on the next button across the bottom right corner, and it's going to ask me to provide a title for my newsletter. So I might call this my winter newsletter. Whoops, clicked away from that too early. I'm going to specify who I'm going to send this to. So for now, I'm just going to specify myself. And then this is some text. I'm just going to put in some body text to show you what it would look like once I receive this. So once I've created this, I can choose to move around the news articles if I want to do, or add or remove some, and then click on Send a News Digest, and this is going to automatically then generate an email from a template, put those news items into there as well as that text, and then send it to whoever I've put in that box. That's I'm going to send an email which looks a little bit like this. Now it's very generic, it's very neutral looking, so it's not going to clash with any of your kind of brand colors or things like that. At the moment, at the time of recording, you can't really change this template, this layout. It's supposed to be really simple, really basic, really easy to use, but as you can see, it's very neutral. It's not going to clash with anything too much. Here's the text, here's some of the links to those news articles, or we can always click on Go to Site, which again is a great kind of call to action to get people to actually boost the traffic to your intranet homepage. So we're just about halfway through now. I just wanted to remind you to subscribe to my channel. If you do like this video, please do like it. If you've got any questions or any other kind of top tips that you'd like to share with building out SharePoint intranets, please use a comment feed below. But please do subscribe because it really does help the channel grow. So the next top tip is SharePoint event web parts. So event web parts can be added, again, anywhere on your intranet homepage. I like to have them nearer the bottom, and it's really easy to add a new event. You just click on the Add Event button, and then you're presented with a little bit like a form that you have when you're setting up an Outlook event. So let's just say this is going to be, maybe we're going to do a charity fundraiser. We can specify a background image. So again, click on stock images or upload your own images if you want to. So let's just put in here charity, select an image, click on insert. We can specify a date of when this is going to be. So this could be, say for example, it's going to be July 11th and it's going to be from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. We can specify where it's going to be. So we can actually provide an address, and this will then show us a little map of where it's going to be. We can provide a link. So say, for example, this might be a link to an online registration form, more information, a website. It could even be a Teams link. If this was a virtual event, it might be a link to a Teams meeting. We can specify categories, which you can change, by the way. I'm not going to have time in this video to show you, but you can change these categories as well. So we could say this is a get together, provide a bit of text. So this is some text. Again, just like with any kind of Microsoft product, you've got bold, italic, underline, different types of fonts, and then you can specify in here event participant, so who's actually coming to the event. Then once you created your event, you just click on save, and that's going to create your event, and it'll very shortly publish onto the events homepage here. The other cool things as well with the event web part, if I just go into edit mode, edit this, you can also see we can specify the source as well. So I can either say just events which are created on this site, or I could specify to say events on a particular list, or I could say all sites, or I could say all sites in the hub, which again is going to roll up events from other SharePoint sites which are associated to this hub site. There's different types of layouts as well. You could have a compact layout or a film strip layout if you wanted a little bit bigger. As I say, it can just take a few minutes for the event just to show up on the web part, but when it does, what's really cool is there's also like a little sort of add to my calendar button which will appear, and when you click on that, a user will then automatically be able to add that event into their own Outlook calendar as a reminder. The next top tip is SharePoint drop-down menus. So these are called hub site navigation bars. Some people refer to them as mega menus, but they're a great way to boost the navigation of your SharePoint intranet. What I mean by this is this navigation bar across the top. So you can see I've got departments, I've got news, I've got apps, and as you can see, it is a mega menu. It can have up to 3 tiers of navigation. You've got news, you've got UK news, and you've got BBC. So these are 3 different layers. They can all be clickable, or what we call labels, which are non-clickable pieces of text, like this UK news, for example. And we can link to anything which has got a hyperlink. It could be something internal, like a SharePoint site, a page, a file, a folder, or it could be something external, like a BBC News or CNN News or another third-party web page. It's really easy to edit and update. Just click on this edit button here, and we can add links by clicking on this little plus button. The pop-up box appears, and we can either choose whether it's a link or a label, which is a non-clickable piece of text. We put in our link in here, the display name, then click on OK, and then it'll add it. Now, the way that the hierarchy of this kind of navigation works is the further left a link is, the higher up it is in the navigation. And then anything which is then indentated underneath it is a child link. So, for example, finance is a child link of departments. And you can have that up to 3 layers. So we've got news, UK news, and US news, which is at that second layer, and BBC and CNN, which is at that other third layer. You can move them up and down by clicking on 3 dots and clicking on promote sublink to move it left or right. So if I now click on save, you'll now see that news link, BBC is now no longer under UK news. It's now at this layer, or I can edit it, click on make sublink, click on save, and that'll move it then back underneath here. It's really important to get your navigation right. And actually having this kind of mega menu can make it really easy for people to find things. You've probably heard this kind of concept before, that people don't want to click more than 3 times to actually find content, and actually using this drop-down menu makes it much easier. So rather than me having to click into, so let's say for example there's some like policies as a link onto HR, so rather than me having to click departments and then HR, then policies, and then something else, we can jump directly into policies with skipping out a couple of different clicks. At number 8, is department SharePoint site templates. So what I mean by this is actually when you're designing your intranet, it's not just about designing an intranet homepage. It's also worth thinking about having a standardized department template, which you can then reuse to create multiple different department areas. So typically your intranet isn't just your intranet homepage. You have these department areas, say like finance, HR, marketing, IT, but it's better to actually design a department homepage, which is then reused across all those different department sites, so that when you're jumping between different departments, actually the layout stays the same and it doesn't get disjointed or people feeling confused because different sites look wildly different. I've seen intranets in a lot of different ways, but I tend to find that the adoption is much easier for people when the department sites all look the same, so that they know actually when they go to a department site, they know where they can find sort of information on the leadership of that department. They know the bio of that department, the events or the documents that they're sort of providing, and the news. So there's a couple of different sort of aspects of this, and once you've kind of got that department homepage right, you can then use something like Power Automate to copy that homepage. So you create multiple department sites, and then you could use what the sort of templated site that you've created to then copy between those different sites. I do actually have a specific video which is all about how to copy SharePoint pages using Power Automate. So once you've created your template here, go and watch the other video, and that will actually tell you how to then copy those home pages between your different SharePoint sites. And number 9, we've got SharePoint FAQs using SharePoint sections. Now, FAQs are a staple of a SharePoint intranet, which is trying to provide knowledge, because one of the main things that a SharePoint intranet should do is cut down on frequently asked questions or people being bothered with phone calls or emails and things like that. Specifically, you see FAQs being set up within a department site, because often questions are usually directed to departments specifically, or people within a department. So having your FAQs on there can be really useful. Again, I do have a full video which talks all about SharePoint FAQs, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail with this, but just to show you how quick and simple it is to create FAQs using sections on a page, I'm going to edit this page here, and then I'm going to scroll to the bottom. And then usually you'd have FAQs right at the bottom of the department page. So I'm going to click on add a new section. I like the 1/3 left option because this is where we can add in an image and a bit of text. We're going to edit the section to make it collapsible. And then the section name is going to be the sort of question. So how do I ABC? We're then going to put in an image, which is going to illustrate this point. So I'm going to put in image web part, and then I'm going to select a stock image, and I'm going to select a picture or something. So actually, top tip as well, if you can search for topics in here, you can find images related to things. So let's just say, for example, I'm going to select this laptop, click on insert, and then there's my image. I can then add in some text. So add a text web part, and then again, this is some text. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. There we go. In fact, actually, what I'll do as well, I saw something cool the other day, which looked quite good. I'm going to add a button web part. Now, button web part is literally just, it's smaller than a call to action web part, it's simply just a button. So I might add, say, a more info button, and then again, just put a fake link in here for now. And that's then that could then click off and link you to somewhere else. Now, the final things that I'm going to do for my FAQ is I'm just going to make this section expanded by default, but I want to make it stand out from the rest of the page. So I'm going to actually make this a slightly light green option. And then what I'm going to do is replicate this. So typically you would have multiple FAQs on a page. So you wouldn't have loads. I wouldn't recommend having, say, any more. Somewhere between 5 and 10 is probably about the sweet spot. But you can duplicate a section, so you can keep that same layout. So now I can say, change this to maybe something like, when is it going to be 1, 2, 3? We can change the image, obviously. So change this image. I can change the text as well if we wanted to. But the main thing is with this is I would choose maybe have the top FAQ open, but then the other FAQ, I would actually make them automatically collapsed rather than expanded. So now I'm just going to duplicate this out a couple more times. So change these questions. So what does it mean to 1, 2, 3? Duplicate section. How do I request ABC? Duplicate one more time. How do I get 1, 2, 3 approved? Blah, blah, blah. There we go. So now when I click on republish, that's then going to republish. And now you can see my FAQs at the bottom, and I can choose to open and close them just by clicking on the title of the FAQ. You can also see here a little sort of like hyperlink button will appear, and that just means we can actually use this as like an anchor to a page as well. So if this was a very large page of a lot of different FAQs, I could maybe anchor to a specific one from a button at the top of the page just by clicking on this link to copy the actual anchor URL. The final top tip is SharePoint stock images. As you've seen when I've been adding in images and click on the change, using stock image library is really good. You can search based on topics like office or car. It could be a color, so like orange, and you'll find loads of images in here. So rather than thinking about all these different images you've got to get together before you build or design your intranet, you can rely on Microsoft stock image library. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please like and subscribe to the channel for future top tips. If you've got any questions or thoughts, then use the comment box below. Thank you very much for watching.